Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode in the Get Unstuck series with myself, Sarah Archer. I am a career and leadership coach, and I work with female leaders to create the kind of career success that means you're not having to sell out or burn out, you're paid what you're worth, and you're really having impact in your role. And I created the Get Unstuck series to give you a mini break in your week to think about something career related, because often it can fall by the wayside when we're really, really busy. Excuse me. So they're topics that cover leadership challenges, personal development, career advancement, and the whole job search piece as well. So they're always practical and short, so around 15 to 20 minutes, and always with things that you can take away and action straight away. And my dog has just started chewing something, so I've just got to rescue something from the floor, so please excuse me. So today's session is all about how to challenge upwards successfully without it damaging your career or your relationship with your boss. So if this is something that's pertinent for you and you're watching today, please do say hello, give me a little wave in the comments, and if you've got a question for me, do pop it into the chat and I'll answer it as we're going along. Or if you're watching on replay, hello. And again, if you've got a comment, just tag me in the comment and I will come back and answer the question later on. So let's dive into today's topic. Now I've rescued my birthday cards from my dog, chewing them. So when can this happen? Well, it could be that you disagree with an approach or a strategy that your boss or a member of the senior team is taking, or maybe you need to make them aware of the risks of a decision that you don't necessarily agree with, or it might be around setting some boundaries around your work or your department team's work, or saying no to something. And as I've kind of referenced, it could be your boss that you're challenging. It could be a member of the senior team or the senior team itself or the board, or it could be senior stakeholders in the organization. And it can feel quite scary to do this. And I think some of this is a bit of a hangover from conditioning, probably when we're at school, that you don't challenge people in authority. And, sometimes this can be a hangover that we take into the workplace and feel that, within the hierarchy, there are kind of levels that we can challenge at and levels that we can't. But it's also, perhaps a worry that you might damage that relationship you have with that individual or individuals, or that it could damage your career in some way, particularly if those decision makers, can have influence over your promotional prospects or, internal opportunities, or even externally. They might influence it. And also you might want to feel like you protect your reputation. So you don't want to be seen as a rebel or a troublemaker or a challenger, and you don't want to be labeled as difficult or even aggressive. So all of that can play into us not wanting to challenge upwards. And I can think of examples of this from my own experience, but also from clients that I've worked with. So when I was in my first leadership role, when I worked for Amnesty International, I had to challenge some of the members of the senior team or my boss. They were directors. I was an HR manager. And because it was a campaigning organisation, it attracted people who had strong views, strong opinions, strong voices, both internally and externally, in order to be successful. And I was establishing the HR function, so I was having to introduce a lot of HR initiatives that weren't their priorities necessarily. And I had to learn, possibly the hard way, how to influence and challenge upwards successfully. And I'm going to share some of those experiences today in this session. But also I've worked with a couple of clients recently who are at director level. So one of them was relatively new in post, and had to do a restructure for her department, one of her first kind of objectives. And she and the chief exec had very different views about that restructure. And so she had to be able to challenge and influence upwards. So we worked on her strategy for doing that in some of the sessions. And I also had another leadership client where she was working for a scale up business, and there was lots of change, lots of growth, and her boss was kind of addicted to change, and there was constant change coming through, and she had to be able to challenge some of that change to protect her team in terms of capacity and pace. And so we looked at strategies for her to be able to do that effectively within the context of a very fast-paced and growing organization. So I'm going to, share some of those strategies today as well with you. And obviously, if you've got strategies that you've used that you're happy to share, please do pop them into the comments. That would be fantastic to know what has worked for you. So the first thing just to think about is that you are not challenging their authority or disrespecting them by putting forward an alternative view. So positioning it for you that you are putting forward this alternative view. It's not about doing something that is disrespectful in terms of their authority or their position. So that's the first thing in terms of positioning. The second thing, which is really important, is to connect with your values and your why, because this is your strength, and this will really help you think through how you want to position it, but also what you want to challenge about. So it's that kind of choosing your challenges, because you might work in a organization where there's perhaps lots of things that you don't necessarily agree with, and if that is the case, then you might want to think about whether it's the right organization for you. But obviously there are going to be lots of things that perhaps you want to have a different approach on. So it's choosing which ones you want to actively challenge, and you can use your values and your why to help you with that. The third thing to think about is obviously the relationship that you have with the person or people that you are going to be challenging. And hopefully you will have built a good relationship with them and that they trust you, because that's going to be an easier position for you to be able to challenge them from. So maybe just think about, do I need to do more relationship building before I start to think about challenging people who are senior to me? And in that relationship, you want to be demonstrating that you understand their goals, their needs, and what it's like for them. So starting with them rather than you when you're thinking about positioning your challenge, because you want to be able to show empathy for their situation and show that you are aware of the bigger perspective. And because the higher up you are in the organization, the more you have to take into account how those decisions impact the wider organization, not just the team or the department. And obviously having that understanding that your boss or other senior people in the organization are coming at it from a wider perspective and having empathy for that it's maybe hard for them to make these decisions, can be really, really helpful. And it can also help you develop something called cognitive flexibility, which all leaders, great leaders, need to have. And that is that ability to understand that there are different perspectives than your own and be able to see those different sides before making a decision. So you can use this as a way to develop a great leadership capability of cognitive flexibility. And then we want to think about other things that might be going on for you. So understanding your unconscious needs, being aware of your unconscious needs and how they might be playing into this desire to challenge. So it's good to just kind of check in with yourself. And those unconscious needs could be things like, I need to be right. I need to look good. I need to be liked. I need to be safe. And I need to be in control. So just understanding, are those kind of coming into play when you're having your response to that particular decision or that approach or that strategy or that request of you? because it's just really helpful to know that, and also to be aware of what might trigger you. Because when you're triggered by something, what happens is that for the first 90 seconds, you're going to be flooded with particular hormones, and you don't want to be responding to anything in those 90 seconds. So you want to be able to be aware that you're being triggered, and you will know that because you might get a surge of anger or frustration or resentment or panic or fear, and you want to be able to step away and then think about how you want to respond when you're not experiencing that surge of emotion. So it's absolutely fine to be able to kind of respond and say, I've got some thoughts about that. I'd like to come back to you on that. Not feel like you have to respond straight away, because you're not going to give your best challenge when you're being triggered. So kind of recognizing that, and also then being aware of our unconscious needs that I have playing into my desire to challenge, which also goes back to that choosing which things you want to challenge on. And then when you are clear about, yes, I'm going to challenge this decision or this strategy, you want to think about how you can get them to hear what you want to say to them. And of course, with any challenge, you're going to be coming with solutions, with alternative approaches. You're not just going to be challenging with, I don't like this. You're going to be coming up with suggestions. So to give you an example of this kind of positioning so they can hear it, when I worked at Amnesty, I am, in the Myers-Briggs personality preferences, I am a feeling decision maker, which means I'm always driven by what the impact on people is going to be. So having that kind of strong empathy about how people are going to be affected by that decision, probably why I was in HR. And what was interesting is that within the senior team, the majority of the senior team were thinking decision makers, which their primary decision making was around facts, logic, analysis, that kind of a decision-making approach. So when I started out trying to challenge upwards, I would be coming at it from, well, this is the right thing to do. People are going to respond negatively to this, or this is not going to land well because X, Y, Z. And they couldn't hear that because it wasn't important to them. And I had to understand that to get them to buy into whatever it was I was trying to propose as an alternative, I needed to position it in language they would respond well to, which was about facts, information, logic, data. And so therefore, once I started to do that, they began to respond more positively to the things I was trying to challenge around. Also, when you're thinking about it, it's very important to think about language, because if you go in with a but, they are immediately going to be on the defensive. Whereas if you go in with, and can I just propose an alternative solution for this? Could we discuss the pros and cons of this particular decision? They're going to be much more responsive to you. And it's also looking for language that can be tempting to use, but really doesn't help you. So also when I was at Amnesty, it was a unionized environment. And what I noticed in the union negotiations is that they would always start with, when they were challenging something, with the greatest respect, which immediately translated into, I don't respect you at all in this situation. And it just wasn't helpful. So sometimes it can be tempting to use these kind of languages, which are not, they're not really going to get you the outcome that you want. So thinking through definitely your positioning, which means that stepping away and coming back to the conversation is really, really helpful. And finally, it's just to be thinking about being brave, because, challenging does mean getting out of your comfort zone, which is what we talked about last week. And, you are paid to be a leader, to be a manager, to bring your expertise to the organization. And sometimes that will mean having to let people know what that means in terms of a decision. So being able to say to senior stakeholders, the board, whoever it might be, let me just explain some of the impact that this decision is going to have if you choose to take this particular route, rather than not saying anything because you feel they're not going to change their minds. You are paid to do that. So it means standing up and actually being brave in your role. And it's going to be a skill as a leader that you're going to need over and over again as you progress through your leadership career. So I hope you found that useful. Just to quickly recap, just to remind yourself, you're not challenging their authority or disrespecting them. You're presenting an alternative view. Building your relationship and increasing the trust is going to be key. Showing that you've got that cognitive flexibility, that you can see different perspectives and have empathy for those senior stakeholders, thinking about your unconscious needs, being aware of them, thinking about what might trigger in you and being able to step away, thinking about how you can present the information so they can hear it, thinking about the language you choose to use, and being brave and knowing that this is something you are going to do in your leadership career. So if this is something that you do find difficult, and let's face it, most of us do, and you would like some leadership coaching around this particular area or other areas of leadership, then please do get in touch and we can have a conversation. So just send me a direct message on LinkedIn or via my website, and we can have an initial conversation about how I can support you with these leadership challenges. So have a great week. I'm going to be back next week, and next week I'm going to be talking about how you get your leadership mojo back. So if you're feeling a little bit jaded, a little bit low on your leadership energy and motivation, if you just feel, oh goodness me, I'm halfway through the year and I just feel worn out already, then do join me next Wednesday at 12:15 for some inspiration on how to get your leadership mojo back. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy the weekend, and I will see you next week.